George Orwell, the man behind Big Brother, prepared and presented by Tony Black. Chapter 1, Introduction. In the vast landscape of English literature, few names have captured the collective imagination quite like George Orwell. Born Eric Arthur Blair in 1903, the man who would come to be known by his pen name, George Orwell, was a figure who transcended his own time, offering critiques of society and warnings of a dystopian future that have since become chillingly resonant. Orwell's work in fiction and nonfiction, most notably 1984 and Animal Farm, have permeated popular culture and political discourse, etching his influence deeply into the fabric of the 20th century and beyond. Orwell's life was as rich and complex as his literary works, carrying him from the imperial outposts of British India and Burma to the battle-scarred landscapes of Spain and the impoverished streets of London and Paris. He explored the trenches of societal degradation and the peaks of political ideology, experiences that deeply influenced his writing and worldview. Orwell's commitment to truth and his relentless critique of totalitarianism have established him as an icon in the struggle for human freedom and dignity. This biography will journey through the life of George Orwell, examining his early years, his formative experiences in Burma and Europe, his political awakening in the Spanish Civil War, and his influential work during and after World War II. It will also delve into his most notable literary creations, exploring the themes, contexts, and impacts of works like Animal Farm and 1984. Through this exploration, we will uncover the multifaceted individual behind the iconic name, a man shaped by the tumultuous events of his time, yet whose insights continue to resonate in our own era. We will see Orwell not only as a novelist and essayist but also as a relentless critic of his time, a sharp political thinker, and, above all, a passionate advocate for truth and freedom. As we navigate through the chapters of Orwell's life, we will also examine his enduring legacy. Orwell's ideas about language, power, and totalitarianism remain deeply relevant in contemporary society. His warnings against the perversion of truth and the rise of newspeak feel particularly prophetic in the era of fake news and alternative facts. In the end, our journey through Orwell's life will not only illuminate the personal experiences that shaped one of the most influential writers of the 20th century but will also highlight the enduring relevance of his work. The story of George Orwell is a testament to the power of literature to reflect, critique, and shape society. It is a story that carries a resounding message that the pen can, indeed, be mightier than the sword. Chapter 2, The Birth of Eric Arthur Blair. George Orwell, the name that would resonate through the annals of English literature and political thought, was not the name given to the man at birth. On June 25, 1903, in the small town of Motihari in the Bengal Presidency of British India, Ida and Richard Blair welcomed their son, Eric Arthur Blair, into the world. His father, Richard Walmsley Blair, was a minor official in the Opium Department of the Indian Civil Service, a cog in the machinery of the vast British Empire. Eric's early life was steeped in the trappings of colonial rule. However, his direct experience of British India was short-lived. In 1904, when Eric was just a year old, his mother, Ida Mabel Blair, decided to move back to England with Eric and his older sister, Marjorie. Richard Blair stayed back in India, bound by his service obligations, visiting the family intermittently. The young Eric Blair grew up in Henley-on-Thames, a world away from the colonial landscapes of his birth. His childhood was relatively stable, if marked by modest means. The Blair family, while intellectually respectable, was not wealthy. Ida Blair, a passionate and caring mother, nurtured her children with the limited resources available to her. From a young age, Eric demonstrated a keen intellectual curiosity and a natural inclination towards writing. He was often found lost in the pages of a book or crafting his own stories. His early writings, simple tales and poems, hinted at the writer he would become. His family encouraged his intellectual pursuits, recognizing in him a talent that could be his ticket to a brighter future. In 1911, at the age of 8, Eric was sent to a small Anglican parish school in Henley-on-Thames, where he received his first formal education. It was also here that he had his earliest experiences of England's class system, a system that would later become a recurrent theme in his works. Eric's education, in many ways, was a pathway into the cultural and intellectual elite of British society. His family, despite their financial constraints, was determined to provide him with the kind of education that could elevate his social standing. The next step in this journey would be his admission to St. Cyprian's, a well-regarded preparatory school in Eastbourne, Sussex. His experiences at St. Cyprian's would leave an indelible mark on the young Eric Blair, shaping his views on class, authority, and the English education system. The tale of Eric Arthur Blair's early life sets the stage for the emergence of George Orwell. It was a life marked by the remnants of colonial rule, the rigidity of the English class system, and a burgeoning passion for writing. These early experiences, as ordinary or challenging as they may have been, played a critical role in molding the intellectual and writer who would leave an indelible mark on the world as George Orwell. Chapter 3: Early Education and Discontent. In 1911, at the age of 8, Eric Arthur Blair, the future George Orwell, entered the world of formal education at a small Anglican parish school in Henley-on-Thames. This was his first brush with the rigors of institutional learning, and it would significantly shape his outlook on the education system, social class, and authority figures. In 1917, with a scholarship secured by his mother, Eric transitioned from the parish school to St. Cyprian's, a preparatory school in Eastbourne, Sussex, which catered to the sons of England's middle and upper classes. This move marked a significant shift in Eric's life, immersing him in the distinct ethos and expectations of England's elite educational institutions. St. Cyprian's, with its emphasis on discipline, academic rigor, and competition, offered Eric a harsh introduction to the realities of the British class system. The school's strict regimen, coupled with its underlying class prejudices, would later form the backdrop for Orwell's critical reflections on the education system in his essay, Such Were the Joys. Eric was a bright student, and despite his discomfort with the school's environment, he excelled academically. He was particularly drawn to the world of literature and languages, developing a fascination for works like Gulliver's Travels and the writings of Rudyard Kipling. Yet, the competitive spirit of the school, the stark divide between the wealthy students and the scholarship boys, and the often brutal enforcement of discipline fostered a sense of discontent in Eric. His time at St. Cyprian's was marked by a deepening awareness of social class and the subtle and overt ways it influenced everyday life. The divide between the wealthy students and the scholarship boys like himself was palpable, and it left a lasting impression on him. This awareness of class inequality, seeded during these years, would later blossom into one of the major themes of his writings. Despite his aversion to the school's ethos, Eric's academic abilities did not go unnoticed. His proficiency in English and his knack for writing were particularly impressive. These talents, nurtured and refined at St. Cyprian's, would eventually earn him another scholarship, this time to the prestigious Eton College. Eric's early educational journey, as challenging as it was, played a pivotal role in shaping his intellectual and ideological trajectory. The experiences of his formative years, marked by a growing discontent with the class disparities and the authoritarian nature of institutional education, would profoundly influence his writings and political thought. This period in his life, filled with both personal and intellectual growth, sowed the seeds for the emergence of one of the most influential writers and thinkers of the 20th century, George Orwell. Chapter 4: The Eton Experience. In 1917, Eric Arthur Blair, who would later become George Orwell, won a scholarship to attend Eton College, one of Britain's most prestigious educational institutions. Known for producing prime ministers, Nobel laureates, and leading figures in various fields, Eton represented the pinnacle of the British education system. For Blair, his time at Eton would prove to be a significant period of intellectual exploration and personal development. Eton, with its grand architecture and long-standing traditions, was a world unto itself. The school's reputation for fostering independent thinking offered Blair a degree of freedom he had not experienced at St. Cyprian's. The rigid discipline and hierarchy of his previous school gave way to a more relaxed and self-directed learning environment. This shift was both liberating and challenging for Blair. Unlike St. Cyprian's, Eton allowed Blair to delve deeper into his interests. He immersed himself in the world of literature, excelling in English and becoming known for his writing skills. Blair also developed a love for history, often engaging in lively debates with his peers. It was at Eton that he first began to write in earnest, contributing regularly to college publications. These early forays into writing hinted at the brilliant writer he would later become. Yet, Eton was not without its challenges. The school was steeped in privilege, and the class differences Blair had first encountered at St. Cyprian's were even more pronounced here. While Eton did offer scholarships to talented students from less privileged backgrounds, the majority of its students came from the wealthiest families in Britain. This stark wealth disparity would continue to shape Blair's understanding of class divisions and influence his later political thought. Blair's time at Eton also coincided with significant events on the global stage. The aftermath of World War I and the beginning of the Russian Revolution exposed him to the harsh realities of political conflict and social upheaval. These events, discussed and debated within the walls of Eton, undoubtedly influenced Blair's burgeoning political consciousness. Despite his academic successes at Eton, Blair decided not to pursue university education. Instead, he chose a path that would take him far from the hallowed halls of Eton, deep into the realities of colonial rule in Burma. This decision marked the end of his formal education and the beginning of his real-world education. Blair's Eton years were instrumental in shaping his intellectual and ideological journey. The experiences, relationships, and insights he gained during this period would prove invaluable in his development as a writer and thinker. In many ways, Eton served as the crucible in which the young Eric Blair began to transform into George Orwell, the incisive critic of inequality, totalitarianism, and political hypocrisy. Chapter 5. Life in Burma and the Indian Imperial Police. Following his time at Eton, Eric Arthur Blair made a decision that surprised many of his peers. Rather than pursuing university studies as was expected, he instead opted to join the Indian Imperial Police. In 1922, at the age of 19, Blair was posted to Burma, then a province of British India. It was a decision that would take him away from the familiar landscapes of England and immerse him in the realities of colonial rule. Blair's 5-year tenure in Burma was pivotal in shaping his political consciousness and views on imperialism. He was tasked with maintaining law and order in the province, a role that often brought him face to face with the harsh realities of colonial rule. As a police officer, Blair was responsible for enforcing the laws of the British Empire, a position that often put him in moral and ethical quandaries. Living and working in Burma exposed Blair to the daily injustices and brutalities of imperialism. He witnessed firsthand the racial discrimination, exploitation, and economic disparities that were inherent to the system. While he was part of the ruling British class in Burma, Blair was increasingly disturbed by the role he played in the oppressive machinery of imperialism. The stark contrast between his life in England and the realities of life in Burma triggered a profound change in Blair. He grew increasingly disillusioned with his role as a colonial officer and began to question the principles of the British Empire that he was tasked with upholding. This period of introspection and moral questioning marked the beginning of Blair's transformation into a vocal critic of imperialism and inequality. In 1927, after 5 years in the Indian Imperial Police, Blair made the decision to resign. His experiences in Burma had taken a toll on him, both emotionally and ideologically. He returned to England with a newfound political consciousness and a determination to become a writer. Blair's time in Burma significantly influenced his writing and political thought. His first-hand experiences with colonial rule and its injustices provided him with rich material for his early works, including his novel, Burmese Days. More importantly, his experiences in Burma solidified his political beliefs, setting the stage for his future work as a writer and critic of social injustices. The experiences of Eric Arthur Blair in Burma were critical in shaping the writer we now know as George Orwell. The young man who left Eton to join the Indian Imperial Police returned as a man deeply changed by his experiences, one who would use his pen to critique and expose the brutal realities of imperialism, inequality, and totalitarianism. Chapter 6. Down and Out in Paris and London. After leaving the Indian Imperial Police in Burma, Eric Arthur Blair was a man in search of a new identity and purpose. He found both in his decision to become a writer, adopting the pen name George Orwell in 1933. His first major work, Down and Out in Paris and London, is a stark and honest account of his experiences living among the poor and destitute in these two major European cities. In the late 1920s, Orwell moved to Paris, hoping to make a living as a freelance writer. However, he found it challenging to secure steady work and soon found himself living a hand-to-mouth existence, struggling to pay for basic necessities. He took on various low-paying jobs, including a stint as a dishwasher in a high-end restaurant. During this time, he lived in run-down hotels and often went hungry, an experience that gave him first-hand insight into the harsh realities of poverty. Orwell's experiences in Paris opened his eyes to the grinding poverty and hardship experienced by the city's underclass. Living and working among the poor, he witnessed the daily struggle for survival that was a stark contrast to the romanticized image of Paris. He began to document these experiences, offering an unflinching portrayal of the squalid living conditions, the brutal work hours, and the constant threat of destitution that characterized the lives of the working poor. In 1929, Orwell returned to London, only to find himself once again living in poverty. He took on various jobs, including working as a teacher and a bookstore clerk, but struggled to make ends meet. His experiences during this time further deepened his understanding and empathy for the impoverished. Orwell's time living in poverty in Paris and London deeply influenced his writing and his political views. His experiences gave him a first-hand understanding of social inequality and the struggles of the working class. This understanding is vividly depicted in Down and Out in Paris and London, which provides a brutally honest and deeply empathetic account of poverty and hardship. Down and Out in Paris and London marked Orwell's emergence as a distinctive voice in English literature. His ability to depict the harsh realities of poverty with clarity, honesty, and humanity signaled a writer deeply concerned with social justice and inequality. Orwell's experiences in Paris and London, his immersion in poverty, and his compassion for the working class all played a crucial role in shaping his later works, most notably Animal Farm and 1984. As such, Down and Out in Paris and London can be seen not just as Orwell's first major work, but as the foundation upon which his later works, his political beliefs, and his enduring legacy were built. Chapter 7: The Road to Wigan Pier, Exploring Working-Class Life. George Orwell's time spent living among the poor in Paris and London had a profound impact on him. His experiences formed the basis for his deeply empathetic portrayals of poverty and working-class life. His next significant project, The Road to Wigan Pier, would take this exploration further, providing a detailed account of the living and working conditions of the working class in the industrial north of England. In 1936, Orwell was commissioned by Victor Gollancz of the Left Book Club to explore the living conditions of the working class in the depressed areas of northern England. Orwell embarked on this journey, spending several months in the industrial towns of Yorkshire and Lancashire, documenting the harsh realities faced by miners and their families. Orwell's time in the North was an eye-opening experience. He saw firsthand the squalid living conditions, the health issues resulting from dangerous and physically draining work, and the impact of unemployment due to the economic depression. He lived among the miners and their families, observing their lives and struggles with an empathetic eye. His detailed notes and observations formed the basis for the first part of The Road to Wigan Pier. In the second part of the book, Orwell presents a long autobiographical essay detailing his development as a socialist and offering an analysis of middle-class attitudes towards socialism. He argues for a pragmatic, inclusive socialism while critiquing the prevalent forms of socialism that he believes are disconnected from the realities of working-class life. The Road to Wigan Pier was a landmark work in Orwell's career, further establishing his reputation as an empathetic chronicler of working-class life and a vocal critic of social injustice. The book's detailed depiction of life in the industrial North, coupled with its passionate argument for an inclusive socialism, demonstrated Orwell's commitment to social justice and equality. However, the book also courted controversy. The second part of the book, with its critique of contemporary socialism and middle-class prejudices, was seen as controversial by some members of the Left Book Club. Despite this, The Road to Wigan Pier remains a seminal work in Orwell's oeuvre, underlining his commitment to speaking truth to power and highlighting the realities of social inequality. Orwell's time in northern England and the writing of The Road to Wigan Pier were critical in shaping his political beliefs and his approach to writing. His experiences further deepened his understanding of poverty and social inequality, themes that would continue to inform his works. The Road to Wigan Pier stands as a testament to Orwell's commitment to illuminating the realities of working-class life and advocating for social justice. Chapter 8: War and Politics, Homage to Catalonia. George Orwell's growing political consciousness and commitment to social justice led him to Spain in 1936. The Spanish Civil War, a conflict between the democratically elected Republican government and the fascist forces led by General Francisco Franco, was a flashpoint in European history. It was a struggle that would come to define the ideological divide of the time, with many intellectuals and activists from across the political spectrum rallying to the Republican cause. Orwell, deeply committed to the ideals of socialism and democracy, volunteered to fight for the Republican side. He joined the POUM, Partido Obrero de Unificación Marxista, militia, a revolutionary socialist organization. His experiences in Spain would come to define his understanding of the complexities of politics, warfare, and the dangers of totalitarianism. During his time on the front lines, Orwell experienced the hardships of war firsthand. He fought in the trenches, facing the constant threat of enemy fire and grappling with the difficulties of poor supply lines and insufficient resources. His time in combat provided him with a deep understanding of the realities of war, an understanding that would inform his later writings. Orwell's experiences in Spain were not limited to the battlefield. He also witnessed the political complexities and infighting that plagued the Republican side. The various factions within the anti-fascist coalition, including communists, socialists, and anarchists, were often at odds with one another, resulting in a fractured and chaotic political landscape. Orwell became disillusioned with the actions of the Soviet-backed communists, who sought to suppress the more radical socialist and anarchist factions, including the POUM. In May 1937, Orwell was seriously wounded in the throat by a sniper's bullet. His injury forced him to leave the front lines, and he returned to Barcelona, where he witnessed the suppression of the POUM by the communists. He and his wife, Eileen, narrowly escaped arrest and fled Spain, disillusioned and disheartened. Orwell's experiences in Spain profoundly influenced his political beliefs and his understanding of the dangers of totalitarianism. He penned Homage to Catalonia in 1938, chronicling his time in Spain and offering a first-hand account of the war and its political complexities. The book was a commercial failure upon its release, but it has since become a classic account of the Spanish Civil War and a key text in Orwell's oeuvre. Homage to Catalonia is an essential work in understanding Orwell's political development and his deepening concerns about the dangers of totalitarianism. The book foreshadows many of the themes that would come to define his later works, particularly Animal Farm and 1984. The Spanish Civil War, with its complex interplay of politics and warfare, served as a crucible in which Orwell's political consciousness was forged, shaping the writer and thinker who would become one of the most influential voices of the 20th century. Chapter 9. A Voice in World War II. As World War II erupted in Europe, George Orwell found himself once again confronted by the horrors of conflict and the ideological battles that defined the era. Although his injury from the Spanish Civil War prevented him from enlisting, Orwell played a significant role in the war effort as a writer, broadcaster, and commentator. In August 1941, Orwell took a position with the BBC Eastern Service, where he worked as a producer and presenter for the Indian section. His primary responsibility was to create and oversee radio broadcasts aimed at countering Axis propaganda and promoting the British war effort in India. During his tenure at the BBC, Orwell honed his skills as a broadcaster and became a respected voice on the airwaves. Orwell's experiences at the BBC were not without frustration, however. He found himself increasingly at odds with the bureaucracy and censorship that accompanied working within a government organization. Despite these challenges, his time at the BBC allowed him to engage with a diverse group of intellectuals, writers, and activists. This exposure to a wide range of perspectives and ideas further enriched his understanding of the complex political landscape of the time. While working at the BBC, Orwell continued to write, both as a journalist and a fiction writer. He contributed articles to various newspapers and journals, providing commentary and analysis on the war and its impact on society. Throughout the war, Orwell remained a vocal advocate for democratic socialism, critiquing both fascism and the totalitarian tendencies within the communist movement. In 1943, Orwell left the BBC to become the literary editor for the socialist newspaper, Tribune. This position allowed him to further engage with political ideas and debates, as well as providing him with a platform to shape public discourse. During his time at the Tribune, Orwell wrote some of his most influential essays, including Politics and the English Language and The Prevention of Literature. Orwell's experiences during World War II, both at the BBC and the Tribune, continued to shape his political consciousness and his understanding of the dangers of totalitarianism. The war provided him with a unique vantage point from which to observe the fragility of democracy and the importance of safeguarding its principles. These themes would come to the forefront in his two most famous works, Animal Farm and 1984. In summary, George Orwell's experiences during World War II further solidified his political beliefs and sharpened his understanding of the world. As a writer, broadcaster, and commentator, Orwell played a crucial role in shaping public discourse and challenging the ideologies that threatened democratic principles. His wartime experiences laid the groundwork for his masterpieces, Animal Farm and 1984, and cemented his place as one of the most influential voices of the 20th century. Chapter 10. The birth of Animal Farm. After World War II ended, George Orwell was more committed than ever to warn of the dangers of unchecked political power. His experiences in Spain had left him deeply disillusioned with Stalin's brand of communism, which he saw as a betrayal of the socialist ideals he held dear. It was in this context that Orwell penned his classic novella, Animal Farm, a biting satire of totalitarianism and one of his most enduring works. Orwell began working on Animal Farm towards the end of 1943. The allegorical tale, set on a farm where the animals overthrow their human farmer in hopes of creating an egalitarian society, was intended as a critique of Stalinist Russia. In the story, Orwell used different animals to represent key figures and groups in the Russian Revolution and the subsequent Soviet Union. The pigs, who lead the rebellion, gradually become indistinguishable from the humans they replaced. This mirrors Orwell's belief that the Soviet leadership had become as oppressive as the Tsarist regime it overthrew. The character of Napoleon, a pig, is a thinly veiled reference to Joseph Stalin, and his struggle with Snowball mirrors the power struggle between Stalin and Trotsky. However, Animal Farm was not an instant success. Its open criticism of the Soviet Union, which was Britain's ally in the war, made it difficult for Orwell to find a publisher. Several publishers rejected it, citing political reasons. It was only in 1945, after the war had ended, that the novel was finally published, receiving immediate critical acclaim. Animal Farm was a breakthrough for Orwell, securing his reputation as a writer unafraid to tackle political issues head-on. It was a commercial success, allowing Orwell to write full-time, something he had long desired. The novel's clever use of allegory and its penetrating critique of totalitarianism made it a classic of 20th century literature. In Animal Farm, Orwell harnessed the power of fiction to offer a biting critique of political corruption and totalitarianism. The novella's enduring relevance lies in its timeless exploration of how power can corrupt and the importance of vigilance against the erosion of democratic ideals. Despite the challenges he faced in getting it published, Animal Farm stands as a testament to Orwell's unflinching commitment to truth, setting the stage for his masterpiece, 1984. Chapter 11. 1984, A Dark Vision of the Future. After the success of Animal Farm, George Orwell turned his critical eye from the past to the future. He embarked on a project that would consume the final years of his life, a novel that presented a chilling vision of a future totalitarian society. This novel, 1984, would become Orwell's most enduring work, its themes and concepts echoing through subsequent decades and becoming ingrained in cultural and political discourse. Written between 1947 and 1948, 1984 depicts a dystopian future where independent thought is suppressed under a totalitarian regime led by the enigmatic Big Brother. The novel centers on Winston Smith, a low-ranking member of the ruling party in the nation of Oceania. Smith begins to question the regime's relentless control over truth and history, a dangerous thought crime that leads him into a doomed rebellion. The world of 1984 is defined by constant surveillance, manipulation of information, and a perpetual state of war. The party maintains control through the thought police and through psychological manipulation and physical control, epitomized by the slogans, "War is peace," "Freedom is slavery," and "Ignorance is strength." 1984 was heavily influenced by Orwell's experiences and observations of 20th century totalitarian regimes. His experiences in Spain had revealed to him the dangers of political extremism, and his work at the BBC had shown him the power of propaganda. The concept of newspeak, a language designed to limit freedom of thought, can be seen as a reflection of Orwell's concerns about the manipulation of language expressed in his essay, Politics and the English Language. When 1984 was published in 1949, it was met with critical acclaim. Its bleak vision of a future dominated by totalitarianism resonated with readers still reeling from the horrors of World War II and facing the onset of the Cold War. The novel quickly became a classic, its themes and concepts, Big Brother, doublethink, thought crime, becoming part of the lexicon. Sadly, Orwell did not live to see the full impact of his final work. His health, already compromised by tuberculosis, declined rapidly after the publication of 1984. He died in January 1950, just 7 months after the novel was published. 1984 stands as George Orwell's final and perhaps greatest gift to literature. Its stark warning against the dangers of totalitarianism and the manipulation of truth has remained resonant for over half a century. In 1984, Orwell created not just a novel, but a cautionary tale for all times, a testament to his enduring legacy as one of the most influential writers and thinkers of the 20th century. Chapter 12. Declining Health and Final Years. Even as George Orwell's reputation as a writer and thinker grew, his health was in a rapid decline. For years, he had been battling tuberculosis, a disease that was often fatal in the pre-antibiotic era. The condition, exacerbated by his intense work on 1984, was taking a severe toll on him. By the late 1940s, Orwell's illness had become so severe that he was frequently hospitalized. Despite this, he continued to write and engage with political debates of the day. His indomitable spirit and commitment to his work remained unyielding even in the face of his declining health. In 1949, Orwell moved to the remote Scottish island of Jura, hoping that the change of environment might improve his health. He lived in a secluded farmhouse, Barnhill, with his young son, Richard, and his sister, Avril. He had lost his wife, Eileen, in 1945, and the pain of her premature death was still fresh. Despite his worsening condition, Orwell managed to complete 1984 on Jura, working in a room overlooking the sea. It was an arduous process, often interrupted by bouts of illness, but Orwell was determined to finish the novel. He was convinced that it was his most important work yet, and he was eager to see it published. In 1949, Orwell was hospitalized again, this time in a private room at University College Hospital in London. He was aware that his condition was terminal, but he refused to give up. He continued to write from his hospital bed, penning essays and reviews and corresponding with friends and fellow writers. During his hospital stay, Orwell formed a relationship with Sonia Brownell, an editorial assistant at the magazine Horizon. He proposed to her in October 1949, and they were married in a hospital room a month later. Orwell's friends hoped that the marriage might provide him with a new will to live, but his condition was too far advanced. On January 21, 1950, George Orwell died at the age of 46. His death marked the end of a life marked by relentless intellectual curiosity, profound social conscience, and a deep commitment to the written word. His legacy, however, was only beginning. His novels, Animal Farm and 1984, continued to be widely read and discussed, their themes and ideas resonating powerfully in the ensuing decades. Despite his untimely death, Orwell's voice remained as vital and relevant as ever, a testament to his enduring impact. Chapter 13. The Legacy of George Orwell. In the 7 decades since his death, George Orwell's influence has remained as potent as ever. His works, particularly 1984 and Animal Farm, have become staples of literature, read by millions across the globe. They continue to inspire debates about politics, language, and the nature of totalitarianism. His ideas and warnings about the manipulation of truth and the erosion of personal freedoms are as relevant today as when they were first published. The concepts Orwell introduced in 1984, Big Brother, doublethink, thought crime, have entered everyday language, often invoked in discussions about surveillance, government control, and privacy. Orwellian, has become a common adjective to describe actions or ideas that are seen as threatening individual freedom or distorting truth. His dystopian vision serves as a perennial warning about the dangers of unchecked power and the erosion of individual liberties. Animal Farm continues to be a powerful allegorical critique of totalitarianism. Its depiction of the corruption of socialist ideals and the betrayal of revolutionary fervor resonates with every new generation. Like 1984, Animal Farm is frequently taught in schools, introducing young readers to Orwell's political ideas and his skillful use of allegory. Beyond his novels, Orwell's essays and journalism have also remained influential. His insights on topics ranging from colonialism and poverty to literature and language continue to inspire readers and writers. His essay, Politics and the English Language, which criticizes unclear and dishonest political writing, is often cited in discussions about the importance of clear and honest use of language. Orwell's personal story, his experiences with poverty, his participation in the Spanish Civil War, his work as a journalist and broadcaster during World War II continues to inspire biographers, scholars, and readers. His commitment to truth and justice, even when it went against the popular sentiment, is celebrated as an example of intellectual integrity. Orwell's influence extends beyond literature and politics. His works have inspired films, television shows, music, and art, further testament to his enduring cultural impact. From Brazil, Terry Gilliam's dystopian film, to David Bowie's Diamond Dogs album, Orwell's vision continues to inspire and provoke. In conclusion, George Orwell's legacy is a testament to the power of the written word and the importance of intellectual courage. His works, from his novels to his essays, continue to challenge, enlighten, and inspire. They remind us of the importance of critical thinking, the value of individual freedom, and the need for vigilance against the erosion of these principles. Orwell once wrote, "In a time of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act." These words, like his works, remain a call to action and a beacon of hope in challenging times. Chapter 14. Conclusion. As we look back on the life and legacy of George Orwell, we see a man whose intellectual courage and commitment to truth transcended his time. Born as Eric Arthur Blair in British India, Orwell navigated an extraordinary life journey that took him from the prestigious halls of Eton to the slums of London and Paris, from the battlefields of Spain to the remote Scottish island of Jura. Throughout his life, Orwell bore witness to some of the most significant events and shifts of the 20th century, including 2 world wars, the rise of totalitarian regimes, and the onset of the Cold War. His experiences shaped his political beliefs and fueled his writing, providing him with the insights and convictions that made him one of the most influential writers and thinkers of his time. Orwell's works, particularly 1984 and Animal Farm, have stood the test of time, their themes and warnings resonating powerfully in our contemporary world. They serve as a constant reminder of the dangers of unchecked power, the manipulation of truth, and the erosion of individual liberties. As we navigate the complexities of the 21st century, grappling with issues of surveillance, propaganda, and the control of information, Orwell's writings continue to offer valuable insights and warnings. His essays, too, remain relevant, offering us a lens through which we can view and understand the world. His ideas on language, truth, and totalitarianism continue to provoke thought and foster critical thinking. His commitment to social justice, his compassion for the downtrodden, and his unyielding belief in the power of the human spirit continue to inspire. George Orwell was more than just a writer. He was a visionary and a truth-teller, a man who dared to challenge the status quo and speak out against injustice. His life, marked by intellectual rigor, moral clarity, and a deep sense of humanity, serves as a testament to the power of the individual to make a difference. As we close this exploration of Orwell's life and work, we can take inspiration from his unwavering commitment to truth and justice. In an age of alternative facts and widespread misinformation, his call for clarity, honesty, and critical thinking is more relevant than ever. Orwell's legacy serves as a powerful reminder that, in the face of deceit and oppression, the act of telling the truth is indeed revolutionary. In the words of Orwell himself, the further a society drifts from the truth, the more it will hate those who speak it. His life and work stand as a beacon, urging us to confront the realities of our times with courage, honesty, and a relentless pursuit of truth.